D'Souza, and we have Clem Yaboa, the chairman of Voice of the Kids, and myself, and we have Dr. Surajit Khanna, who's coming in right now. But before, I just want to tell you a bit about about Dinesh D'Souza. I want to tell you a little bit about him before, and then I'm going to introduce Dr. Khanna. He's going to talk about his new initiative, and he's going to talk about what he does. So, Dinesh is really a national known person. He is a movie producer who's produced a number of very successful movies. I guess the second most popular political movie ever produced in the world. So he's been successful there. We're going to let him talk about himself and give him his background. I want to introduce Dinesh D'Souza to Willie. He's the engineer and Christian Fellowship Council. Clem Yaboa, Voice of the Kids, and Dr. Surajit Khanna. And Dr. Khanna is now going to give us a short speech on his new initiative having to do with the Juvenile Justice Reform Act of 2018. Dr. Khanna is a child safety advocate. He is a champion of Voice of the Kids. He's a servant of the underserved. Dr. Khanna, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll introduce Mr. D'Souza. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Gary. Good afternoon, and welcome to Mr. D'Souza. Good afternoon, Brother Willie. Good afternoon, Clem. And good afternoon, the audience. I'm glad that we are back again, my audience. I love this audience. It's been a while. I've been in and out. But today's Friday. We always say Friday is always a good Friday. As we all know that we've been talking about this initiative about the juveniles. And as you know that we talk about child safety. So Juvenile Justice Reformation Act initiative that started by me has multiple aspects, but we are concentrating mainly, today's topic would be mental incarceration. This is a new topic that I just said to Gary this morning. Gary captured it. Well, this actually comes from one of our young adult who came to my morning show on last Wednesday talking about mental incarceration. Well, today, what we see that the system is ripe with a lack of love and plethora of punishment for juveniles and young adults caught in the correction system. Yes, they get released, but internalize this imprisonment and they become mentally incarcerated, even though they have been released to the public physically. We see that most of the time, even the children, those who are out, the juveniles, the young adults are out, physically they're out, but mentally they're not. They tend to carry on the behavior learned while incarcerated, sometimes from those who are hardened criminals. When they're released, there is a stigma attached to them when they have to record. Many companies will not hire them because they are criminals. They can't get housing because they're criminals. They are not accepted and made to feel that they are not important. Well, we all make mistakes. And as we know, today is Friday. We say this is a good Friday. If we all make mistakes every path we do, and God gives us second, third, fourth, I don't know how many chances. So why everyone in our society cannot give these juveniles, those who are coming out of the incarceration, a second chance? So they deserve second chance and they deserve an opportunity. Well, this is exactly why I implanted this initiative a few months ago, that we are going to give them a roadmap for success. So this Juvenile Justice Reformation Act post-incarceration initiative will address these issues. In fact, we already established a number of partnerships with different businesses where the youths can get job and they can have a better life. we recently partnered with Mr. John Marcus, who is the owner of Windsor Driving School in New Jersey. And what he does, he takes all these post-incarcerated juveniles, young adults, those who are claimed as criminals, and they put them in the job training for a CDL license. And then he gives them a job within 30 days after successful completion, and also makes them an owner operating drivers so that they can have their own business. And each of them today, they're making at least 70, 80, or even 6 figures. That's very intriguing. When I met with them, I thought that, well, everybody may not be interested in a CDL license. Well, because this is a transportation industry, we can have different jobs there. And then I introduced the chairman of Voice of the Kids, Clay Miboa, who is a CPA. He said, well, I can train them in 30 days how to do taxing or how to do a bookkeeping. So there are facilities that can be done besides CDL. We met with Mr. Mike Brown, who is a real estate broker. He said, well, I can train them and give them a license in 30 days. So there are short programs that will definitely give a chance to these juveniles, those who think that their entire future is dark. No, everybody should have a hope. Everybody can definitely take to the next stage. And I'm really intrigued and impressed with our special guest in the studio today, Mr. Dinesh D'Souza, who also a proponent for giving the voice of the society, especially the young children or young adults, so that they can be a part of the future of this country. Thank you very much. I would give this microphone to Gary.
Thank you very much.
Mr. D'Souza.
Thank you. Hey, who is Dinesh D'Souza? Well, I met him about 14 years ago. I interviewed him about 14 years ago for a book he wrote, What's So Bad About Christianity, or something like that. Anyway, he's a proponent. He's a prominent career. He's a writer, a scholar, a public intellectual. He's very bright. I can attest to that. He's become an award-winning filmmaker. Born in Italy, Mr. D'Souza came to the U.S. at the young age of 18 years old, but graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Dartmouth. He's called one of the top young public policy makers in the country, and he quickly became known as a major force in public policy through his books, speeches, and film. Without any more background, Dr. D'Souza, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on the Reformation Act are.
Well, let me just say briefly, I came to America with $500 in my pocket. I grew up in Mumbai. It used to be called Bombay, but it's now Mumbai, India. I came alone. My parents stayed back in India, and little did I know when I came as an exchange student that I would be here to stay. I'd become an American citizen in 1991. And this has been for me a land of opportunity. And I don't just mean sort of ladders of opportunity that enable you to make your life better in a material sense, but I also mean a chance to write the script of your own life, to sort of live the kind of life that may not be possible in other countries, where your circumstances dictate what your future is going to be. I also notice that America is a country of second chances. And that is true across the board. In India, for example, you start a business, you go bankrupt, well, you're kind of finished. You don't get a chance to sort of pick yourself up and try again. But here you can. You have people who have tried 2, 3, 4 times and then made it the 5th time. So I like the fact that America not only makes it possible to succeed, but is forgiving of people who stumble and fall. And I take what Dr. Khanna has been saying, as you've got some young people and they have made some mistakes and they do need to pay for their offenses, but one should not cancel out their life prospects as a result. They should have a chance to get back on track, play by the rules, improve their circumstances, and have a better life. So without knowing the details of these plans and proposals, I endorse the spirit behind them, because I think that it represents the American spirit of giving people a shot to make things better, even if you have a few goof ups along the way.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. We all have goof ups. Now we want to get into talking about you, and we want to learn more about you. I think our interviewer is Dr. Surajit Khanna, but I think other people are going to join in with some questions. Dr. Khanna?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. D'Souza, for endorsing this spirit of mine in regards to giving the young adults, those who are coming off the incarceration, to get a second chance. I am very much impressed with your book you have written, and also with your messages in different movies in regards to your personal history with socialism. So could you please explain a little bit more into it, that what was the reason for you to go and write about socialism, and what do you see that you don't agree with it?
Well, socialism was a huge idea in the 20th century, and it was tried in many, many countries. In fact, you could almost say that half the real estate on the planet was under some sort of socialism. There were different types of socialism. There was the kind of authoritarian socialism of China and Russia, but we also had democratic socialism. Many people today say, well, we want democratic socialism. You know, India, for example, had democratic socialism. The Indian independence leaders had learned it from Britain. They studied in Oxford and Cambridge, and they picked up a kind of what was called Fabian socialism at the time. So I was born in 1961, and in the first decade and a half of my life, I lived under socialism. So my family had a ration card, and it said that every week you can buy so much rice and no more, so much sugar, so much cooking oil. We also were on a 7-year waiting list to get a phone because the phone company, it was only one phone company, it was run by the government. So this was the India I grew up in. And if you remember, in the 1970s, India was like the begging bowl of the whole world. And Americans would tell their kids, you know, eat your dinner because there are starving children in India. Well, socialism is one of the reasons these people were starving. It denied a whole generation of Indians of their birthright. So starting in the 1980s and 90s, the Indians began to move away from socialism. And the Indians were not alone. The Chinese did the same thing. Russia, later in the early 90s, the whole Soviet system collapsed. So what happened is that socialism really was discredited all over the world. And then, even though many of us thought socialism is finished, it's never going to come back, suddenly in the 21st century, wow, socialism, the word itself and the ideas behind it begin to creep back into American politics and to creep back into the Democratic Party. So I'm interested in this new socialism that is supposed to work when all other previous socialisms have failed. And that's what my book is about, my new film. It is an exploration of what I call the United States of socialism. Is that a direction we want to go in? And if not, how do we block it?
Hello. Okay, we're back here. I think you went mute for a second. Dr. Khanna, are you with us? Dr. Khanna, you're on mute.
Sorry. I said, thank you very much, Mr. D'Souza, for explaining this and clarifying, because I just want to make sure that our audience, those who are listening to us, they do not misinterpret that we are not against some of the things which we are trying to do or some of the political parties are doing here, but it is against what Mr. D'Souza just explained, that everybody is given a quota, like he was explaining of the ration card. Okay, and I can, Mr. D'Souza, I can endorse it. Okay, because I also grew up in India up to 18. When I came here, I was under the same thing, and I see that. So I don't want the audience to misinterpret that. Okay, this is something which we are trying to make a difference here. But I just want to emphasize that how bad socialism could be, because somebody's trying to control you. Okay, socialism is such, what I understand is somebody's trying to control you because, okay, in this week, you can only have this many pound of rice, this much water, or this much this. So what kind of land are we in United States where we call as a land of opportunity? And so where does this count from, right? So I really appreciate that you are clarifying this in your book, and it is very informative. But Mr. D'Souza, what's going on in the Scandinavian, so that you kind of wanted to explore a little bit on that?
There are many Americans who believe that there is one place in the world where socialism does work, and that is in the Scandinavian or Nordic countries. And this would apply to countries like Denmark and Norway and Sweden and Finland. And it is true that life is quite pleasant in those countries. And they have a sort of a strange type of socialism. Now, they're capitalist in wealth creation and socialist in wealth distribution. And what I mean by this is that they are very careful to have policies that encourage businesses to create a large pie, to make their countries prosperous. They don't interfere with that. We see in America sometimes the kind of demonization of the rich. You'll hear politicians say, oh, the millionaires, oh, the billionaires, they're the bad guys. You'll never hear the Scandinavians do that. They don't demonize their rich people, no. And even though they have a big welfare state, they distribute the burden across the whole society. In other words, if you're a rich guy, you're going to pay 50% of your income in taxes. If you're a middle-class guy, you pay 50% of your income in taxes. And if you're a poor guy, you pay 50% of your income in taxes. So that gives the Scandinavians the sense that they are all in the same boat, because you won't hear Scandinavians talk about free college, free healthcare, because they're not stupid. They know that college is not free. You need buildings, you need technology, you need to pay the teachers. Healthcare is not free. Hospitals aren't free. You have to pay doctors. So nothing is free. Somebody has to pay. And the Scandinavian view is that since we're all in the same boat, we have to share the burden across the whole society. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Some other guy's going to pay for my expenses. Everyone has to pay their own, as they say, fair share.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Clem had a question here. Clem, I'm going to turn it over to you. You just unmute there.
Well, I mean, right now we have, we're talking about socialism as against maybe capitalism, as against maybe communism. Now, my question is, so what are you proposing? What ism are we proposing as the next step? Because clearly, if you are from a developing country, capitalism isn't necessarily your go-to ism. Because what has happened is that the developed world have been taking everything out of those developing countries and making them poorer and poorer and poorer, because capitalism is based on beggar my neighbor policy. Make my neighbor a beggar. Okay, so now my question is, if the socialism isn't the go-to ism, then what new ism are we here proposing?
That's a very good question, and let me answer it this way. I think that you might be confusing two separate ideas, capitalism and colonialism. These are not the same thing. Colonialism is based on force. And so, for example, the British and the French and the Dutch, and to some degree the Germans, had colonies all over the world where they would take the raw materials from poorer countries and they would manufacture goods in the home countries, in Britain and France, and then sell those goods in foreign markets. And that is a kind of neo-colonialism that I think you and I would agree in rejecting. But let's remember that is not capitalism in any meaningful sense of the term. Capitalism is the simple idea that if you have something that I want and I have something that you want, we engage in a voluntary trade. So for example, I make shoes and you make shirts, and I need shirts, so I give you shoes in exchange for shirts. This free exchange, that is what I understand by capitalism. So I don't have the same prejudice against capitalism that I think you do, but I think you do because you're mixing up capitalism and colonialism, in my opinion.
No, I don't think I am. The capitalist mentality is I have control over the manufacturing, the money. I have control over it, and I am going to make the maximum out of it, however I do it. And I don't care who else is a victim along the way.
Well,
am I right or wrong?
You're wrong, I think, because you have to let's look at a simple example, okay? Let's take a farmer who grows wheat and then sells it on the open market. So the farmer is an entrepreneur. He's growing wheat. I agree with you. He wakes up in the morning and he's not thinking about you or me. He's only thinking about himself and his own family. Otherwise, he's never going to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. But he gets out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and he makes the wheat. Now, what I'm trying to say is he's going to sell it at the highest price that he can sell it for. Agree? Do you think that he's exploiting you or me?
Agreed. It's exploitation.
Why is he exploiting us when he's trying to sell us something that it cost him his hard labor to buy, and he has every right to exchange for something it cost your hard labor and my hard labor to sell?
Okay, so because he has a monopoly control over that product.
How does he have a monopoly control over the product? Because you are just as free to go out and grow wheat yourself. Let's take something like the technology we have today, the iPhone, right? There was no iPhones existed in the world. In fact, there was no demand for them. Nobody wrote Steve Jobs a letter and said, make a phone that does texting and email. No one did that. Steve Jobs thought of it. He made the phone and then he put it on the market. Now, nothing was stopping you or me for having come up with the idea and making our own product. We didn't think of it. So why would we begrudge him results of being able to sell something that he created?
You see, that's a relatively simplistic approach, because when you look at, for example, where I come from, currently they call it Ghana. It used to be called the Gold Coast. There are plenty of gold. We, in the 60s, in the 50s, we produced gold bars, 24-karat gold bars. We couldn't sell it on the world market. Why? Because the capitalists had formed a cartel, and the cartel required that one of the members of the cartel has to approve the quality of the gold, put an SAS stamp on the bar of gold that I have produced before I can sell it anywhere else. Capitalism made it possible for them to control, and they still do control, those things through the capitalist markets.
So here, Clem, I believe, is where we are in complete agreement, and we are in disagreement only on the labeling. Because to me, when you have a cartel that is suppressing free trade, that is the opposite of capitalism. OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Countries that control the market for energy and oil for so many years, that's not capitalism. That is creating a monopoly that is the opposite of capitalism. So I believe, for example, that the federal government should step in and break up these companies like Google, because they have a monopoly, and we need to have competition, which is the essence of what, to me, a free market is all about. A free market is you and me being able to compete in our ideas and our products, so that the best one can win. But what you're saying is that they suppress the market, they control the market, and that to me is not capitalism.
Well, okay, but that's a hallmark of the capitalist mentality, because the capitalist says, I'm going to make the maximum money regardless, and if I have to make a friend and make another friend and make another friend, and we come together and make the maximum money. See, see my fellow Africans toiling, growing cocoa, and they cannot get the maximum out of chocolate because somebody else wants to pay them the minimum dollars, so that they themselves can go out there and maximum on the sale of chocolates. That, see, when you take it at a global level and you break it down to the national level and then to a lower level, capitalism still is the operating word at the global level, national level, and then even to the regional levels. Okay, because you may label it as a monopoly, but it's a hallmark of capitalism. Monopoly is a hallmark of capitalism. It's a hallmark of socialism. It's a hallmark of any other ism. Okay, but that being the case, the capitalist use of monopoly is in a way as to disenfranchise the poor and make them poorer.
Well, except I think that there are very few monopolies in the world. I can only think of a handful. I mean, one of the reasons that we have these digital monopolies with companies like Google is only because this is a new technology. Now, when the automobile was first invented, the car, Henry Ford had a virtual monopoly. His Model T was pretty much the only car that the ordinary man can afford on the market. There was only really one car company selling a car for $400. But think of it today. There are just hundreds of car companies made all over the world. So you can't protect a monopoly for very long.
No, I completely agree with both of you. I really appreciate the dialogue here. But before we get into a little more deep into it, I think Gary, you wanted to ask a question?
No, I think Willie, do you have a question, Willie, you were going to ask?
Well, I guess more of a statement. What, right now in America, you have a group that's saying healthcare for all will collapse our economy. And is that true? As a capitalist society, do you think healthcare for all would actually collapse our economy here in the United States?
No, but I think that healthcare for all as a kind of government run program or even a government guarantee is not a good idea for this reason. By and large, the government should step in and do things that people can't do for themselves. I think that's a very sensible operating principle. I think it comes from Lincoln. The government should do for you what you can't do for yourself. If there's something you can do for yourself, there's absolutely no reason for the government to do it for you. Now, when it comes to healthcare, I think that the vast majority of Americans can afford to pay what I would call routine healthcare costs. I'm not talking about catastrophic healthcare costs. I'm talking about routine healthcare costs, which means things like you have a cold, you need to have a prescription. If the cost is $50 or $75, the ordinary American can afford to pay that. Now, if you need to have a heart transplant, that is what I would call catastrophic, then the ordinary American cannot. They'd have to mortgage their house to pay $100,000 to pay for that kind of operation. So in my view, what we need is a government guarantee of what can be called catastrophic healthcare. The government covers the expenses that the ordinary American cannot afford to pay. But otherwise, if you let the ordinary American pay for routine healthcare, the cost would go down dramatically. The reason the cost of healthcare is high right now is if I go to the doctor and he says, I want to do 4 tests, it never occurs to me to ask, what are those tests and what is it going to cost me? I never ask that question because I'm not the one who's paying. So the bottom line of it is the healthcare industry jacks up costs, just like the colleges. They jack up the cost because the student is not the guy who's paying. And I think that's the problem with our healthcare system. The costs are out of control because the customer isn't the one who's actually paying the bill.
Well, likewise, I would say that in other aspects, the cost of policing, okay, is out of control.
Clem, I think we're getting to the end of our time here. I hate to cut you short. I wanted to give,
another minute.
Dinesh, you do have a movie out. Tell us about your movie.
Yeah, the movie is about socialism. It has the title Trump Card because it's in the election year, and this is a debate about Trump and am I for him or against him. But the real theme of the movie is, should we move in the direction of socialism? Is this a good idea? And what does it mean? I favor a society that maximizes opportunity, but doesn't equalize result. I think that's in a single sentence where I'm going with this. So I don't support unfettered capitalism. We obviously need a safety net in our society. So check out the film. It's called Trump Card, and the website is just trumpcardthemovie.com.
trumpcardthemovie.com. Okay. Thank you very much, Dinesh. It was great to have you here. I know that we're going to have you back if we can, if you're so kind to allow us. We would be so blessed to have you back. We really appreciate you having here. We thank you, Clem, for your questions. Dr. Khanna, before I go, Dr. Khanna, any last words?
Well, my only last words is that if Mr. D'Souza can tell the audience what should they be looking for, because Mr. Willie, he brought up the healthcare, okay, and then Clem brought up the police system. So there are two things which are going to is the driving force today for the election. I know that we are not trying to party anybody here, but I would like the audience to be educated enough that, and I like the way you explained everything, Mr. D'Souza, regarding the socialism and colonialism and capitalism. I think a lot of people don't understand, and you rightly said about the healthcare. So my last word to you to tell the audience, what would they need to understand properly so that they can make the decision properly to elect the next president?
Well, let me actually just say this. Our politics has unfortunately become very polarized. And if you turn on a typical television show, either everybody agrees with each other or they start shouting at each other. And so I actually think that just this conversation that we've had back and forth has actually been a very good civil conversation among people who don't always agree. But I think if we keep this spirit of civility and open discussion, that's one very good way to make progress in America.
Wow. Well, we want to thank you. So much for getting ready to cut right off. Again, thank you, Brother Gary, Dr. Khanna. We would love to have you back again, sir. I mean, we like to tap your psyche.
I look forward to it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Praise God. Listen, I just want to jump in before we get off. This is our short day here. We want to thank all of you for listening and tuning in. Tune in with us on next Tuesday. That's right. We'll be here 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. right on up to 6. And also Wednesdays, 3 to 6. And also, such as today, Friday, from 3 to 4. And we want you to continue to tune in. Now, listen, we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week gospel radio program, which is cfcgospelradio.com. Again, cfcgospelradio.com. You can listen to our ministry. You will listen to our pastors. You'll hear some great, great music. And if you want to know anything about the CFC, go right to our page, cfcpage.com. Again, that's cfcpage, PAGE.com. You can look up for our trucking school. You can look up also for our real estate school, our certified health home care. And if you'd like to start your own radio program, you can also do that. And Clinksters. For Clinksters, just go right out to earn while you watch while you earn.com. Again, that's earnwhileyouwatch.com. You can also go there too and sign right up for the Clinksters, or you can go right to CFC page and also find Clinksters there. So again, we want to just thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much again, Gary, Dr. Khanna. Listen, we've got a lot of information that we want to be giving to you. So make sure you tune in on Tuesday, because we want you to join the movement with Dr. Connor, myself, Glenn, and John Marks, and the CFC, Helping Hands. So just keep it locked right here. Next Tuesday, we'll see you then. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.